Imagine you are a mother in ancient Rome. You have just survived childbirth, one of the most dangerous things a woman in the ancient world could do. The midwife lifts the baby and turns to hand it to you, and you look down, and you freeze. Not because you are confused, not because you are delirious from pain, but because what is lying there, breathing, moving, making sounds, does not look like a human child. It looks like something that came from somewhere else. This was not a rare moment in ancient history. It happened more than you think. And what happened next, what these parents did, what their communities demanded, what their priests ordered, is one of the darkest, most disturbing chapters in the entire history of human behavior. Across almost every ancient civilization on Earth, Celtic tribes in Britain, Roman settlements across Europe, Norse villages buried in snow, African kingdoms deep in the forest, indigenous communities from every continent, there existed a belief so powerful it overrode the most fundamental human instinct. The instinct to protect your own child. The belief was this: sometimes, in the dead of night, a supernatural force, fairies, demons, forest spirits, underworld gods, would creep into a home, steal the real human baby, and leave behind a replacement, a fake, a creature wearing the face of your child, but carrying nothing human inside. They called it a changeling. And the way you knew your baby had been replaced was simple. It looked wrong. It behaved wrong. It felt wrong. What these ancient people did not know, what no one on Earth knew for thousands of years, is that the children they were looking at were not demons. They were children born with conditions that medicine had no language for yet. And those conditions, what they looked like, what they did to a human body, will make you understand exactly why ancient people reacted the way they did. And then it will make you question whether that understanding makes what they did forgivable. The first condition that triggered this terror was found not in the behavior of the child, but in its skin. The midwife would notice it immediately. The skin was not soft. It was not pink. It was hard, cracked and split into thick diamond-shaped plates pressing outward from beneath, deep red raw flesh bleeding through every gap, pulling the infant's face into a permanent expression of frozen agony. The eyelids were forced open. The lips were stretched back. The ears were sealed shut. This is called harlequin ichthyosis. In simple terms, the body produces skin so fast and so thick before birth that it builds up like armor, and the moment that armor hits open air, it cracks and splits open. The baby is essentially encased in a shell. Every movement tears it further. Every breath is a battle against a body that is crushing itself. To a Roman midwife in 200 AD, this was not a sick child. This was a demon that had tried to wear a human skin and chosen one that did not fit. The village elders were called. The priests were called. And before sunrise, the child was carried back into the forest and left there. Another condition that shook ancient communities to their core was one that attacked not the skin, but the shape of the child entirely. There were births where the legs never separated. From the waist down, fused, one single limb, the feet sometimes splayed outward at the base like a tail fin. The child would move this single fused limb, slowly, rhythmically, like something that belonged to the water and not the land. This is called cyanomelia, mermaid syndrome. In simple terms, during development in the womb, the blood supply meant to feed both legs comes from a single vessel that starves the lower body and fuses everything together, two legs that never became two. Ancient coastal communities knew exactly what this looked like. It looked like the sea had sent something back. Celtic legend said water spirits would occasionally place one of their own in a human cradle, a scout, a spy, to live among people. The child with fused legs was not raised. It was returned to the water. Whether gently or not depended on the village. Another condition that sent ancient Rome into a state of complete panic was one they had no category for at all. Not a child with two heads, one head, one skull, but across the front of that skull, two complete faces, four eyes, two noses, two mouths. Sometimes both sets of features moved together. Sometimes they moved independently of each other. One face calm, one face crying, at the same time. This is called diprosopis, craniofacial duplication. In simple terms, a single protein in the embryo misfires during development, and begins duplicating facial structures, essentially attempting to build two faces in the space where one was meant to go. Roman priests had a specific word for this birth. They called it an ostentum, an omen delivered directly from the gods to warn of catastrophic events. The birth of a two-faced child in Rome was documented as a signal of coming war, incoming plague, or the collapse of leadership. The Senate was notified. Sacrifices were performed. The child did not survive the first day. Another condition that haunted ancient civilizations was one that seemed to defy everything they understood about where life lived inside a human body. Some children were born with their hearts on the outside, not inside the chest where it belongs, but sitting fully exposed on the surface of the skin, beating visibly, covered only by a thin, translucent membrane you could see through. You could watch every pulse, every contraction, a heart beating in open air. This is called ectopia cordis. In simple terms, the chest wall does not close fully during development, and the heart migrates outward before birth. Sitting outside the body, it was meant to be sealed inside forever. Ancient priests across multiple civilizations interpreted this the same way. The heart was the seat of the soul. If a child was born with its heart exposed, offered outward, on display, it meant one thing. This child had been sent back from death, rejected by the underworld, returned with its soul visible as proof that it did not belong among the living. These children were taken to the temple. What happened there was never written down. Another condition was one that did not reveal itself immediately, which made it the most unsettling of all. The baby looked almost normal at birth, almost, except the toes, slightly shortened, bent inward at a strange angle. Easy to overlook, easy to dismiss. But as the months passed, as the child grew, something began happening beneath the skin. Hard, dense, immovable lumps forming along the neck, the shoulders, the spine. The child would cry when touched. The parents would press their fingers into their child's back and feel, not flesh, but stone. This is called fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva. In simple terms, the body's repair system breaks down completely and begins replacing muscle, tendons, and soft tissue with solid bone. The child slowly petrifies from the outside in. A second skeleton grows inside the first. The person becomes locked, frozen, in whatever position they last held, eventually unable to open their mouth, unable to breathe. Ancient forest communities watched this happen over months and years and reached one conclusion. The forest was reclaiming one of its own. This child was not human. It had been placed among them as something sent to take root, and now it was becoming what it truly was: wood and bark and bone. They did not wait for it to finish. And then there was another condition, the one that disturbed people most deeply, precisely because the child looked completely normal. It arrived in the world the right size, the right color, the right shape. Parents held it and felt relief. This one is fine. This one is healthy. But somewhere in the first year, something changed. The child who had been responding, smiling, reaching, went somewhere, still breathing, still in the room, but looking through people instead of at them, not answering to its own name, repeating movements that had no end, screaming at sounds no one else could hear, unreachable. This is what we now call autism spectrum disorder. In simple terms, the brain is wired to process the world differently. Sensory information arrives louder, harder, more overwhelming. Social instincts that most brains develop automatically do not wire the same way. The Celtic people had the most complete explanation for this. They said the fairies came in the night and took the real child, the one that had been there before, and left this hollow replica in its place, breathing but unreachable, present if but gone, eyes open but looking at something no one else in the room could see. These were the children they feared the most, because they had seemed human first. The prescribed ritual for recovering your real child from the fairies was to place the changeling on a hot shovel over an open fire, or leave it on a hillside through the night, or hold it over a river and threaten to let go. The logic was absolute. Hurt the changeling enough, and the fairies will come to retrieve their own and return what was taken from you. The children who died in these rituals were not recorded as murdered. They were recorded as returned. 8 conditions, 8 children, 8 different faces of the same moment, a parent holding something they did not understand, inside a world with no science, no medicine, no language for what they were looking at. Only fear and faith, and the absolute certainty that whatever this was, it was not theirs. Historians have found the remains of these children buried across Europe, outside the boundaries of cemeteries, face down in the soil, with large stones placed on top of their bodies to prevent them from rising. Not buried in grief, buried in precaution. Here is the question. History will not let you escape. Were these people monsters, or were they simply human, operating at the very edge of what a human mind can accept when something it loves stops making sense? Because here is the part that should sit with you the longest. These were not cruel people by nature. These were parents. People who built homes and cooked food and protected their other children with their lives. And they still did this. So the question is not whether they were capable of it. The question, the one no one wants to answer honestly, is this. Under the right fear, with the right pressure, with no information and an entire community standing behind you demanding something be done, what would you have done?